Podcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. It is a pleasure to have you back for session 3 of our webinar series on the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices Updates, or MUTCD. I'm Kara, and on behalf of the Ohio LTAP Center, we are glad to continue this transition to the 11th edition and the new Ohio Supplement with you. Today's section focuses on parts 4, 5, and 8, covering signals, CV and AV, and rail crossings. To lead today's discussion, I am joined once again by Kevin Fiant from ODOT's Office of Roadway Engineering. Before I turn the floor over to him, I have just a few housekeeping items to ensure a smooth session. We will be monitoring your questions throughout the entire presentation. Please submit them through the questions panel as they come to mind, and our team will be responding to you directly in that same panel. While we don't have a dedicated Q&A block at the end, if a particularly relevant question is raised or we are unable to address it through the question panel, we may pause to address it to the entire audience. Should you experience any issues with your audio or video, we recommend closing the webinar and rejoining using your original link. If the problem persists after rejoining, please message us via the chat panel and our team will be happy to assist you. I highly recommend downloading the PDF of today's slides. Not only is it great for taking notes, but it also gives you immediate access to any clickable hyperlinks to manuals and resources mentioned today. To view the files, simply select the Handouts pane and click on the desired document. The file will automatically download to your default web browser. You can then select the file at the bottom of your browser window to open or save it. Today's session is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be emailed to all registrants once it is processed, as well as a link to the PDF of today's presentation. All right, with that out of the way, let's get started. It's my pleasure to hand it over to Kevin. Kevin, the virtual floor is yours.
All right, thanks, Kara, for kicking us off. And again, my name's Kevin Fiant. Been with ODOT for 25 plus years now. 20 of those I spent up at District 6 doing a wide variety of different things, from project management to some design work, maintenance of traffic, lots of different wore lots of different hats basically in my time at excuse me, at District 6. Also today here, kind of monitoring the session, we've got Jonathan Young, who is our traffic control section head here at Office of Roadway Engineering. Also Paul Beck, he's with our TISMO group, and he's sitting in to kind of keep tabs on the traffic signal section. And then we also have Tim Brown, who's with our Rail Development Commission group here at ODOT as well. So we've got all those folks here, and hopefully we'll be able to answer any questions you all might have as we kind of go through this. We will go ahead and jump right in. All right. So again, I'm just going to kind of reiterate a couple housekeeping things Kara already mentioned, but again, if you can, as we're going through this, add any of your questions into the chat or question box, and if possible, if you can, if it's related to a particular slide or a particular section of the MUTCD, just add that into your question, so that'll help us research and better respond to that particular question. Also, as Kara mentioned, we will, our intent is to be responding to those questions kind of as we go in the chat box. If there are any that we are not able to answer today during the session, we will do some further research and get back with those folks after the session. And then again, at the end of the session, we will, if there are any outstanding questions or any that come up, that you think of right towards the end of the session, we can certainly talk through any of those questions at the end. Also, just want to make everybody aware that with this session, we are planning to have one break, roughly in the middle of the session. So I just want to let everybody know that that we will have one break throughout this, so that folks can stretch or refresh coffee or do whatever they need to do. So moving on, just to talk a little bit about our agenda for today. So for the folks that have set in on the first couple sessions, the first part of this will be a little bit of a review, but I feel like it's important for any people that maybe haven't been able to attend the first couple sessions, just to hit on a quick overview of the new Ohio Supplement and how to use it in conjunction with the MUTCD, which now makes up our new Ohio MUTCD. Again, if you want more information, for a deeper dive on that overview of how to use the manual, as well as the part 1 of the manual, you can get that information from session 1. And I believe our LTAP colleagues are going to be doing some replays of those sessions throughout the year. So kind of keep an eye out for that if that's something you are interested in. But for this particular session, the focus, like Kara had mentioned, focus is parts 4, which is our signal section, part 5, which gets into automated connected vehicles, which is a brand new part within the manual. And then we're also going to talk some about part 8, which gets into rail and light rail crossings and the traffic controls associated. So talking a little bit about session goals. So again, our intent here is to show everyone how to get around in the new Ohio Supplement and MUTCD, and how to use those two documents together as our OMUTCD. We also want to make sure that we're talking about some of the specific language changes from the previous manual, and we'll also be highlighting the Ohio specific language that has been brought over to the supplement document. And then, the final goal is, again, just an overview of parts 4, 5, and 8. Again, so that you at least have kind of a baseline and an awareness, and then if you have an issue on a project you might be working on or a task you're working on, you would have a good idea of kind of where to go to look for that information in the future. Excuse me. Some things that we won't be able to do with this session is just because of the size of this document and the amount of changes that were involved with this update, we're not going to be able to touch on every last change throughout, these particular sections. It's the national MUTCD alone has 1,162 pages, and then our Ohio Supplement's another 174. So it's just there's a lot there. So that, no way that we're going to be able to get through every last change, but we did want to try to make sure we hit on ones that we felt were important for users to be aware of. Also here on this slide, wanted to make note that if you are looking for a little bit of a deeper dive, these couple hyperlinks here will take you to some of the information related to the previous national manual, which the previous version was 2009. And there's a link to a document that redlines that document to show the proposed changes with the 11th edition. So that's a really nice resource if you need to take a deeper dive to kind of see what has changed between the 2009 edition and this current MUTCD. And then also this link here takes you to a document that lists out different disposition comments. So during the course of the development of the MUTCD, there was open period for comments, and this document gets into a lot of those comments and how those comments were resolved, and just adds some additional content. Okay. All right. Is everybody hearing me? I got some feedback that maybe the audio dropped out for a second.
You sound great, Kevin. We can hear you perfectly.
Okay, great. All right. We will move on here. So again, just to kind of talk a little bit about the transition. So previously, as most of you are aware, we had one standalone document that we created here in Ohio as our OMUTCD, and I provided a link that in this slide that will take you to that webpage that has all of that information. But what we did with this release of the new MUTCD is we elected to shift gears a little bit and instead utilize the national MUTCD and then just provide an Ohio supplement that focuses just on the Ohio specific content. That allows us to be a little bit more nimble when it comes to changing updates in the future, and then also the overarching purpose of the MUTCD is uniformity throughout the country. And so as we went through this process, we also went at it with an emphasis towards trying to get closer and closer to the national MUTCD. I mean, we certainly still have quite a bit of Ohio specific information, but that is something that we are working towards, moving closer towards the national manual. So this slide takes a look at, on the left here, you've got just a screenshot of the previous OMUTCD. So as you can see here, it's the 2012 edition. So it's been out there for quite some time now. And what we ended up transitioning to, so these two documents together now make up our new OMUTCD. So you've got the National Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, and you've got our Ohio Supplement to the MUTCD. So these two documents now make up that OMUTCD. Also want to make sure that everyone is aware, recently the national manual had a revision that was released. It was just a little over a month ago, back early March. So with this new model, it's really important that users keep up to date on both our Ohio Supplement and the national MUTCD, since both those documents we're using together. So as you have needs to check out things in our OMUTCD, just make sure that you're pulling up the latest version of the national manual, and in this case, it's now revision 1. So this slide, just wanted to this is again, these first several slides kind of review for folks that have been on the previous sessions, but feel like it's important just to kind of, keep reiterating the different parts and kind of what's covered, and then how we broke this up as far as our training for these different LTAP sessions. So again, part 1, we covered that in session 1, and again, that's kind of the general foundational piece of the MUTCD document and our Ohio Supplement. So it kind of gets into a lot of the definitions and the legal authority and so forth. Parts 2 and 3, we covered that in our last session, and that gets in, I mean, that's really kind of that's the biggest, page-wise, that's the biggest part of the MUTCD. So that gets into signs and markings. So we did cover that in our previous session. So if you missed that and that's something you want to learn a little bit more about, check out session 2 when the LTAP folks replay that here, I believe sometime this summer. For this particular session, we're going to be looking at part 4. So that gets into our highway traffic signals. We're going to be looking at part 5, which gets into the considerations for automated vehicles. And I just want to make sure to make note that previously part 5 was a completely different content. It was previously set up to address low volume roads. For those of you, say, county or township folks, that type of information, what they did with this particular manual is they basically took that low volume information and moved it into the different applicable sections. So if it was related to, maybe signage for low volume roads, you would find that in part 2. If it's markings, part 3, etc. So moving on here, part 6 of the manual gets into the temporary traffic control devices, and we've got a session that's going to solely cover that part. That's our next session coming up here in a couple weeks. And then part 7 gets into our traffic controls for school areas, and part 7 along with part 9 is going to be covered in our 5th session. Part 9 gets into our bicycle facilities. And then as far as today's session, we also are going to be covering traffic control related to railroad and light rail grade crossings. So that's kind of a overview of what we're going to be getting into today, and then also kind of a look back and look ahead at what our sessions are going to be covering. So this slide, again, this is a review, but just kind of want to continue to reiterate it, how to effectively use the MUTCD and Ohio Supplement. And really we kind of look at it as it's a 2-step process. First off, you need to determine which section of the MUTCD that you're interested in, and you're going to need to do that in the national manual. Once you have determined what part you're interested in, what section you're interested in, take a look at our Ohio Supplement table of contents. If that part and section is listed in the Ohio Supplement, you're going to need to just use the Ohio Supplement document. If the part and section is not listed in the Ohio Supplement, you're going to need to just use the national or federal MUTCD document. And a key point, and I kind of want to keep hitting on this, is with our Ohio Supplement document, if there was any Ohio specific content, we pulled over that whole entire section into the Ohio Supplement. We did that, purposely, because we didn't want users to have to be bouncing back and forth between the two documents. So we, even if there was just one paragraph of a 40-paragraph section that had some Ohio specific content, we pulled that over so that a user could focus on that particular content directly within the Ohio Supplement document. So moving on here, just want to talk a little bit about getting around here on our web page that provides our Ohio Supplement information and the national MUTCD information. So I'll dive into the actual live website here in just a moment, but a couple things I wanted to stress with regard to the Ohio Supplement is, number one, when you're looking at the Ohio Supplement document, you pull up that PDF document, whatever device or browser you're using to access that document, make sure that you have your bookmarks open, because all of the particular sections in the Ohio Supplement, they're bookmarks, so you can jump to those easily. Another key thing I wanted to mention as well is that we wanted to make this Ohio Supplement document as searchable as possible. So, obviously all of the text content was pretty much already searchable, but we also went through and ran all of the figure graphics, all of those types of things through some software, so that all of the figures and tables, also that text is also searchable. And that's something that I'm hoping that on the national MUTCD side, that will be something that gets incorporated in the future, because a lot of the figures and tables within the national manual still, you are not fully searchable. So we will jump in here. I'm going to get out of this. And we're going to jump in here and take a look at the web page, the landing page for our Ohio Supplement, and I'll kind of show you a few things. All right, I'm going to move that over here. So everybody's seeing that. I've just pulled the web page up for the Ohio Supplement. Kara, is that showing up on the screen share okay?
It sure is. It looks great.
Okay, great. All right, so again, here, this is our landing page for the Ohio Supplement. The top here just kind of lists, some of the background information about, when this became effective, and, some of the legal authority as to, the use of this document. The one thing I did want to point out here, this section that we did the little inset, this talks about how our intent is that this Ohio Supplement plus our national MUTCD now makes up our OMUTCD, and we wanted to make it very clear that those terms can be used interchangeably. So if somebody is talking about OMUTCD, now that means the Ohio Supplement and the national MUTCD. So there are a lot of places within ODOT documentation that just maybe refers to the OMUTCD. We want to make it very clear that the intent is that, now that this is effective, that the OMUTCD is the Ohio Supplement plus the national MUTCD. So that this section gets into that. Moving on down here, again, just some of the legal information and where this is mentioned in the Ohio Revised Code, and some of that background information there. And then towards the bottom are a couple links, buttons that take you to both the Ohio Supplement, which I'll click on that and get that loaded up here. I'll come back to it. And then it also takes you to the national MUTCD. So both of those buttons get you to the pertinent information. Also just wanted to point out, so like I had mentioned earlier, there is now a revision 1 of the national manual. So we added a little bit of information with a recent update to this web page, just with a kind of an overview of what that revision was all about. There's a link that takes you to more detailed information here if you want to look at the specifics of the changes. One other thing I did want to hit on, and it's maybe a little hard to see in the screen share, but as far as known errors, so on the national MUTCD, this revision 1, a lot of the revisions were actually known errors that were pulled in and addressed with revision 1, but they're now starting to compile some additional known errors. So make sure to keep track of that information. And what I wanted to point out here, as far as our Ohio Supplement goes, the only times that we were pulling in any known errors into our Ohio Supplement content was if that known error directly impacted our Ohio specific information. So I just kind of wanted to make sure that that was clear as well. And then here at the bottom, again, just kind of a refresher on how to use the two documents together, and also just make sure, be aware that with these PDF documents you can do a Control F to do search. And then on the right hand side here again, if you happen to be looking at a mobile, using a mobile device, say, to access this may be formatted slightly different. This may be at the bottom, but again, providing the same links over here that take you to both the federal manual, so that's where you would get to the most current federal information, and then also our Ohio Supplement. And just real quick, just zoom in a little bit here, but again, just to emphasize, so all the information is bookmarked here. You can just expand that, jump to a particular section, say in section 4, everything's bookmarked. Also, if you do the search feature, so just Control F, I'm in the browser, if you happen to download it to Acrobat or another PDF reader, I believe Control F seems to be pretty universal, but anyhow, check your particular software for the search features. But you can, like I say, you can go in and type in search terms, and so I just plugged in pedestrian there. And the reason I wanted to do that is just kind of illustrate how I had mentioned earlier, this, we specifically set this up so that the text within the different graphics would also be searchable. If you do this, like if you look at the same graphic in the national MUTCD, unfortunately, like if you search for pedestrian, a lot of the text of indicating pedestrian unfortunately isn't searchable as of yet. That's some feedback we've provided to our colleagues at FHWA, but hopefully that is something that will be updated in the future on the national side. But at least on the Ohio Supplement, we have added that in so that you should be able to search for and get hits both within the text content and the figures. So just kind of wanted to point that out as well. So we will jump back here to our slides, and like I say, the links to that landing page are at the bottom here, and then this QR code that also takes you to that web page. Also, before we jump into the main content for this session, I wanted to just do a quick review. Going back into part 1, wanted to talk about compliance of devices, and this is a really important topic because the MUTCD lays out a handful of traffic control devices that have specific timeframes tied to them, but the vast majority of updates, any changes to traffic control devices are not tied to any specific compliance date. So I wanted to bring up this, FHWA has set up a MUTCD FAQ page that just has some frequently asked questions. And one of them gets into this, if there is no compliance date for a new requirement, when do those devices have to be upgraded to meet the requirements? And what I highlighted here on the slide is, I'll just kind of paraphrase, but basically it's that any traffic control devices, may stay out in the field throughout their serviceable life. They just would need to be replaced or updated when you were, say at the end of the serviceable life, or if you had a project that was going through there or other scheduled maintenance, that would be the time frame that you would have to go out and replace traffic control devices that are not specifically listed as a target compliance requirement. And again, here's a hyperlink that takes you to that particular FAQ page. So there's several other question answers in there that have some pretty good information for folks as well. So I definitely encourage you to check those out. This slide, I just, pretty much every session we're going to be doing, I'm going to talk some about the target compliance states. I mean, so these are the items, and you can see here there's just six rows. These are the items that were identified by FHWA that have specific time frames tied to them. So, you've got weight limit signs for your structures. We talked about that in session 2. Also in session 2, we talked about low clearance signage for structures. There's a couple items here related to that. We also talked about maintaining that minimum retroreflectivity with our pavement markings. And then today, in our session today, there's a couple of target compliance states associated with some of the rail grade items in the MUTCD. So we're going to take a little deeper dive on those today. But this particular table is definitely one for all you folks out there that, have any involvement, responsibility in planning for or implementing updates to your traffic control devices. You need to make sure that you're aware of this information here. Very important stuff here. So moving on, just want to kind of do a quick refresher on how the MUTCD is set up as far as, on the left-hand side here, this is the current MUTCD, and this is just a screenshot of the terms standard, guidance, option, and support. And those terms are used throughout the whole entire manual, and they're very important to be familiar with and aware of the meanings, and you'll find the meanings for those in section 1C01. And on the right-hand side here, this is the previous national MUTCD, and what they did here is that this is the marked up version that shows changes. So I just wanted to point out real quick, there were a few subtle but important changes just to point out here. As on the standards, within the standards definition, there was an addition of basically allowances for deviations as long as there is engineering studies associated. So that was an addition into the new manual. You'll see it over here. And then the other thing I want to point out is under guidance, this is pretty subtle, but important to point out, they did do away with the but not mandatory portion of this sentence that talks about guidance. So I just want to point that out as well. So your standard and guidance statements have had a little bit of change from the previous manual. And like I said earlier, if you missed session 1 and you want to take a deeper dive into a lot of that information that gets into part 1 much deeper, as well as a deeper dive into just the overall MUTCD and Ohio Supplement and kind of how those go together, check out our session 1 on that. All right, moving forward here. So before we jump into the details for part 4, 5, and 8, I just kind of want to hit on this again. Those of you that have spent any time looking at this new MUTCD and compared it to the previous OMUTCD or the previous national MUTCD, you'll notice that there is just a lot of information that has been moved or reorganized in this new manual. So if you're familiar with where to find particular information in the previous manual, there's definitely a possibility that some of that information may have been moved to a different section, different location. By and large, we feel like a lot of the reorganization, actually they did a pretty good job of trying to get more information together so that it makes logical sense. You're not having to kind of bounce around quite as much to find the pertinent information. But I again just want to kind of stress that you do not be surprised, if as you're getting into the new MUTCD, that some of the content that you maybe were used to finding in a particular section may have been relocated. That's definitely happens quite a lot with this new release. So jumping in now to part 4 and kind of taking a little closer look at the part 4 section or chapters. Just want to talk a little bit about how all of it's organized here. So this slide just kind of lays out the general organization of part 4. And one thing I want to kind of point out when we're looking at this is, so, and this is kind of a terminology thing, but it's important to kind of be aware of this. But at the top level, the term highway traffic signals, that's kind of the top level term. So everything that's within this chapter is a highway traffic signal. So you've got your traffic control signals. So that's what that's your traditional red, yellow, green ball signals that you find all across the state and all across the country. But along with that, you've got your bicycle signals, you've got pedestrian control features. Those are all part of highway traffic signals. So it's all kind of, an umbrella underneath of highway traffic signals. I think a lot of times people think of traffic control signals and kind of think of it as the top level, but the way that the MUTCD is set up, the term highway traffic signals is intended to kind of capture all of these subcategories. So I just kind of wanted to point that out as well. And next slide here actually is just a continuation, because this part 4 does have quite a few chapters. Gets in, like I say, to all the different aspects of the highway traffic signals. So just quick look at the additional chapters that make up part 4. And we're going to take a look now at to change things up a little bit from the previous sessions. In part 4 here, what we did with the slides with this is we wanted to kind of emphasize all of the things that were within our Ohio Supplement. So we're going to just kind of take a look at the specific things in our Ohio Supplement first, and then we've got some slides later on that are going to kind of touch on some of the changes just between old and new that maybe aren't necessarily within our Ohio Supplement document, but are important also to be aware of. So the first section wanted to mention here, sections 4F.04 and 4F.08. This gets into our flashing arrow sign use. So our Ohio Supplement, and this is something that we had in the previous manual related to our flashing yellow. We had some information in there about the installation of these signs when these types of signal installations are happening. So this is, it's not new from the previous manual, but it is something that we added again with our Ohio supplement just to make sure there was emphasis on the addition of these signs. One thing that is new that wasn't previously in the OMUTCD is we also have a section, multiple sections that get into the flashing red arrows. This previously was completely taken out of the OMUTCD. However, with this release, again, we're trying to come closer to being in line with the national manual. So we elected to keep this information in there. And if these types of signal installations were to be used, we would want this sign to be installed with that. With that being said, the flashing red arrows are not something that we ODOT wise uses regularly, and we don't really have any plans to be using regularly, but we felt like it was important to just go ahead and leave that information in there in case there was a use case, maybe at a city or other situation where those might be useful. We don't see those as being something that are probably going to be used much at all, but it is information that has been maintained with this new manual. Excuse me. Moving on, another section that is in the Ohio Supplement, 4F19. So that gets into the pedestrian timing during preemption, and what we did in the Ohio Supplement. We did away with, there was an optional statement in the national manual that allowed the shortening or omission of the pedestrian change interval. We elected just to eliminate that option in our Ohio Supplement. We just felt like it was important to maintain that that time period for the pedestrian crossing before the signal went into preemption. So that is a change that we have made with our Ohio Supplement as well. Moving on here, so also another section that is in our Ohio Supplement, 4I06. This gets into, again, pedestrian intervals and signal phases. What we ended up doing here in this graphic actually does a pretty good job of illustrating it, and this is not a change from our previous OMUTCD. Our previous OMUTCD had eliminated these two options here within this figure, but with the previous OMUTCD, you just did not see any of this information. And one thing that has been helpful, I think, with how we set up this new Ohio Supplement is that we felt like it was important, even if we were deleting content from the national manual, we wanted to make sure it was clear that it was still shown, so that folks could see what was at the within the national manual. But again, we did away with these two instances where you have the flashing hand, during that yellow. So we did away with both of these instances here. So going to kind of transition from that. So, we didn't have a huge number of sections that were within the Ohio Supplement. So we're going to transition over to look at some other significant changes that are in Part 4. We'll jump into that now. So first off, in Chapter 4C, that gets into the different warrants, the studies associated with, justifying signal use. One thing we wanted to point out here is with the new manual, with the warrants 1 through 3, they now, specifically mention this use of the more critical minor street volume. So that is a change from previous manual. And then the other thing just kind of point out here is that, you know, it's possible that either of the minor street directions could satisfy these warrants. You know, so that's just something to keep in mind, you know, as you're evaluating these warrants, so that there has been a change here. Also, you know, continuing looking at the signal needs studies or the warrants associated with these. Warrant 4 gets into pedestrian volume. There was an addition in the new manual that gets at you know, whether your crossing has a median that is sufficient to provide space for protection of pedestrians. So previously there wasn't any information related to that. So this warrant has changed some within the new manual. And then similarly with the school crossing warrant for signals, it's now a requirement, you know, if you're meeting the requirements associated with this warrant 5, that you need to have pedestrian signal heads. That's now a requirement, whereas before that was not. Continuing on with Chapter 4C, Warrant 7 has included some updated crash thresholds. This is based off of the NCHRP project 7-18 crash experience warrant for traffic signals. So that information from that research project has been incorporated, which is a good thing. I mean, the previous information had been around for a long time, and you know, so there are some changes associated there, and we'll take a little closer look at that. So this table is one of the tables associated with that. Just gets in, you know, again, to the different lane configurations and then the crash information. So this information has changed from the previous manual. And similarly, this is looking at a 3-year period, whereas the previous one's looking at 1-year period. Again, this information has been updated with the new MUTCD release. So something to be aware of there. And then also these next 2 tables also get into the 1-year and 3-year periods when you're talking about communities that have populations below 10,000, or if you've got speed limits above 40 miles per hour on the major street. So these tables also have been updated. So definitely be aware of this if you're going through and looking at your studies related to traffic, your traditional traffic signals. And again, this table here just shows the 3-year period and the updates associated with that. Next change I wanted to highlight real quick was related to mid-block crosswalks, and specifically in 4D01, there's some language in there that has changed slightly. Previously, it talked about mid-block crosswalks shall not be signalized. That has changed now to a should, and then to go along with that, it adds the information in here about engineering study, engineering judgment, with restricting of turning movements from the side street. So these couple of things are new, are changes or new additions with this new manual. And another change, a new addition to this manual is there is a figure, and then there's also some language in the new manual that talks about a situation, say if you've got a T intersection You are allowed to display continuous red in situations where you really want to emphasize that that there's no through movements. So you could have the continuous red along with your turning movements below. So that is a new change, new addition to this manual. The use case is limited, but there would be, there could definitely be some situations where that could be useful. Another pretty important change that I wanted to talk about a little bit is with Chapter 4H. This is a brand new chapter in the new manual. Talks about bicycle signals, and previously the use of bicycle signals was covered under interim approval 16. And now that information and some adjustments from that interim approval 16 have been incorporated into the new manual. So this whole chapter covers the application, use, operation of these signals. But down here at the bottom, one thing I really wanted to emphasize, and I'm gonna read this whole thing, and then this the highlighted information is in my opinion very important to be aware of. But just reading this chapter, or paragraph 9 from chapter 4H says, if used, a bicycle signal face shall only be used to control bicyclist movements or bicyclists moving on a green bicycle or yellow bicycle. Signal indication are not in conflict with any simultaneous motor vehicle movement at the signalized location, including right or left turns on red. So this is a big deal here, and this, when you kind of work through this and look at the different type applications, this effectively, this really, it limits a lot of the uses of these bicycle signal faces. So you essentially have to have a standalone phase, solely for the bicycle use, which, unfortunately, there is a lot of information that has been put out there that's available on some, from some different resources that do show the use of bicycle signal faces when you do have simultaneous motor vehicle movements. So you got to be really careful with the use of these types of signals, and just make sure that you're referring back to this language in the MUTCD that gets into that. So, they're like lead bicycle, LBI type applications. There's some guidance out there from other resources that show the use of these along with simultaneous motor vehicle movements, which, based off this language, which is standard language in MUTCD, is not permissible. So just something definitely to be aware of if you are involved with the layout of bicycle signals on any project you might be working on. Another thing just to mention here related to the pedestrian detection location. So this information here in the previous manual, this used to be kind of made up of a whole series of graphics, figures, and they kind of consolidated a lot of this information into one graphic to just kind of show, again, like here's the legend for this. So your shaded dark A areas, these are your preferred locations. Your B is your acceptable locations, and then your C is acceptable but less desirable. So this does a pretty good job of laying out, like if you're looking at, design on a pedestrian detection location, kind of lays out your from most preferred to least, as to where to locate those. Obviously get into a lot of urban situations, and you do have to make some adjustments because of other conflicts. So this does a pretty good job of giving you some good information to go off of there. And this is, it's a change in the new manual. It basically kind of consolidated a lot of previous information. Another important thing with this, with the new manual that's now in the MUTCD that previously was not, is the use, this whole chapter of that gets into the use of our RRFBs. So the rapid rectangular flashing beacon type crossings that we use at some of our pedestrian locations. One of the key things here is to be aware of the signage associated with that. So if you look back at the interim approvals associated back with the previous manual, it was calling out the use of this sign here on the bottom right of the slide. That is no longer the sign to be used for these applications. They've updated that sign with this new manual. It is now this design. So if you do have any RRFB installations happening in your communities, just be aware that this sign has been updated, and make sure that you're incorporating that with your new installs of these crossings or these traffic control devices. And also just want to hit on the section within the chapter on warning beacons. A couple things to note here, and we've got a couple pictures to kind of illustrate this. So with the new manual, the use of these flashing beacons within the sign itself for a school speed limit is no longer allowable. That's a change from the previous manual, and there are some new details. I mean, the typical application, you would add those warning beacons outside of the sign. So, basically the only instance where beacons are incorporated within the sign panel itself is this example here on the right hand side. So you've got an exit direction sign, and you've got some advisory speed. It is permissible to have beacons there, but that's the only instance where beacons are permissible on, within the sign panels themselves. So that's just something to be aware of as well. And so that gets us to our break, and we're at 10:58 here. So we'll, Kara, how about we go with say a 5-minute break so you can hit the restroom, freshen up coffee, do whatever you need, and we'll just start back up at 11:05. So we'll go a little over 5 minutes, just do say 7 minutes. We'll start back up at 11:05.
Sounds great, Kevin. We'll see everyone at 11:05. Welcome back, everyone. It is just 11:06, so we will get started as soon as Kevin is ready.
All right, everyone. Hope you're able to stretch your legs a little bit and get some fresh coffee or whatever you need to do. We'll jump into the rest of the session today, which we're going to hit on mostly. Remainder is part 5 and part 8. So we're going to jump into that now. So moving into part 5. So again, part 5, like I said before, this previously was the section that covered low volume roads. As I mentioned before, so if you came to this session thinking you're going to find info on low volume roads, there's no longer a standalone section with that information. It's kind of been sprinkled throughout the whole entire manual where it's relevant. But what part 5 now is covering is the traffic control device considerations for automated vehicles. I mean, if you've been attending conferences, things over the last several years, automated connected vehicles is obviously a huge topic, and there's a lot of research happening currently on these types of vehicles. So, for the first time, and obviously it's a very good move in my opinion anyways, is that the MUTCD now has a part that addresses some of the considerations for automated vehicles. And currently it's a pretty small section, small part, and there's actually only one paragraph in the whole entire part that has any standard language associated with it at all. And currently we do not have any Ohio specific language associated with part 5. But we will take a little closer look at a few of the sections that I just thought were kind of key to be aware of. So we'll take a look at that now. So again, chapter 5, again, not a ton of information in this particular part, but chapter 5, I do want to take a quick look at some info related to section 5A03 and section 5A04. With 5A03, I'm guessing most of you have seen this, but this table here, it's a pretty good depiction of the different automation levels. Like I said, the top of the table is basically no automation down to the bottom where it's basically fully automated. So this is just kind of for terminology as you start to see more information related to automated vehicles. There's probably going to be a lot of talk of, oh, well, this is a level 3 vehicle, and this kind of gives you a little bit of background as to what that is, what that means. Section 5A04, I pulled in a small snippet of a few paragraphs from this section and a couple things I highlighted here up at the top. And this is kind of a theme throughout this whole entire chapter associated with connected vehicles, but there's a lot of talk about maintenance policies and the importance of the upkeep and maintenance of traffic control devices, and it's certainly important and always has been important for the human driver, but when you start talking about driving automation systems, then that just kind of ups the importance of having good maintenance practices set up for the different traffic control devices. And then the other thing I just highlighted here that is important to be considering, and as you're evaluating projects and determining what traffic control devices to be used there, you need to kind of be shifting your mindset a little bit to be thinking about, all right, we've got the human driver, of course, and that's going to be that way for quite some time, but you've also got to start thinking about, well, how does this particular traffic control device, how does this impact the potential, automated vehicle that might travel through this intersection or this corridor, whatever your project might be working on as far as traffic control devices. So something to, a few things to keep in mind there. Moving on, Chapter 5B gets into some of the specific, a little bit more specific provisions. And I'm going to hit on a few of these. We're going to look at 5B02, 03, and 04. And with 5B02, this gets into markings, and a couple of the things, I just pulled in, again, just a small portion of that particular section, but a few things I highlighted here, some of the recommendations when it comes to markings, your longitudinal lines, normal width of longitudinal lines of at least 6 inches, and edge lines of at least 6 inches in width. And, so that's something at ODOT, at least the majority of our roadways, that's something that we have adopted. We actually had adopted that some time ago, just because it is helpful also for the human drivers, but just something I wanted to kind of point out, that the width of your longitudinal lines certainly is helpful when it comes to automated vehicles. And then down here towards the bottom, just wanted to point out, the raised pavement markings. If there are instances where you're using raised pavement markings, they need to be a supplement to, rather than a substitute for whatever pavement marking that they're being placed in association with. So you don't want to go out there and use only raised pavement markings. You want those to be used along with whatever longitudinal marking that you might be applying out there. And then it also talks some about the importance of contrasting markings. So in particular, when you're talking about, say, some of your concrete pavements, it's important to have that contrast in the markings so that the automated systems can better pick up those markings. So section 5B03, this gets into some of the traffic signal considerations, and I just highlighted a couple things here. And again, that, like I said, this whole entire chapter is pretty much it's guidance information, recommendations on, that agencies should start to be doing some of these things. But a couple things I highlighted here, signal faces with back plates, that just helps those automated vehicles pick up those signals, especially the back plates having the reflective, retroreflective borders. And that's something that we've been doing here, on our ODOT projects for quite some time. And then this last one here, it is recommending the use of the flashing yellow arrow signal indications for those permissive turns. That's something that we are doing more and more of on some of our signalized intersections. So these, there's just a couple other things that I highlighted here that important to be thinking about when it comes to the world of automated vehicles. And then when it comes to temporary traffic control, a few things I just wanted to highlight here. The use of the end road work sign. I mean, we all know you drive through lots of work zones. Sometimes those signs that indicate the end of the construction, end of the road work, they get knocked down. They maybe aren't even put up in the first place. But when it comes to automated vehicles, that's a pretty important component, just so they know, they pick up on that sign, and then they respond accordingly that they're exiting the construction zone. And then another thing that I felt like was pretty important in this section talks about the continuous marking at the beginning of your temporary traffic control zones, and especially in those lane transitions, just again, so that those automated vehicles can pick up on the markings and those transitions. And then kind of the same thing here with the raised pavement markings, that you want to, you don't want to use them as a substitute for your pavement markings. They're a supplement to. And then down below here, I mean, I just highlighted this paragraph 2 portion of it. And this, I mean, this is an issue whether you're talking human drivers or automated vehicles, but if we've got anybody listening to this session that has some entrepreneurial spirit and can come up with a way that we can better mark our work zones and remove those markings so that we're not having all this scarring that leads to a lot of confusion later on down the road, that's something that would be extremely valuable to many folks all across the country. Just coming up with some solutions, some better solutions for the marking and then the subsequent removal of markings, which ends up with pavement scars that that are misleading for human drivers as well as for automated vehicles. So a call out for anybody that might have any ideas on how to improve that. And here, this slide, I was talking with our colleagues at Drive Ohio and asking them about, some of the research that they had been doing and if they had any photographs or any things that kind of illustrate, some of the different things we were talking about. And they've got a lot of great stuff, and they're doing a lot of very cool stuff at Drive Ohio in this space. But this particular picture, I mean, it's a pretty straightforward picture, but a couple things just to kind of point out here. I mean, so this particular road, I mean, it's been crack sealed, and you can see the crack seals kind of over top of the edge line here in a lot of places. And then you've also got this signage here that's kind of partially covered. Both of these things, these things certainly impact the human drivers, but definitely have a significant impact as well on the automated type systems. So, my background coming from District 6, I mean, it's very easy, on maintenance type projects to kind of overlook the pavement markings going back in after you do, a crack seal type maintenance project. But, those are some of the things that are important to kind of keep in mind, make sure that you're setting that up in your projects, or if it's your maintenance crews, that you're allowing for, and planning for that application of pavement markings after you do that crack sealing, just so you can kind of take care of some of those issues with, the crack sealing material going over top. So now we're going to transition into part 8. So this gets into our traffic control for railroad, light rail transit, grade crossings. And this slide here just kind of shows you the different chapters associated with this part. And we're going to kind of take a little deeper, closer look at each of those chapters. So first off, in chapter 8A, looking at this gets into the general considerations when it comes to your grade crossings. And I've got a few slides here hitting on some of these topics, and we're going to jump into those. So in the introduction portion of 8A01, one thing that is prevalent kind of throughout the whole entire part 8 is this terminology, or the use of the term diagnostic team. This term is used throughout this whole entire part of the MUTCD, and it's an important part of the process of evaluating the interactions of the traffic control device requirements at a rail grade crossing. And these diagnostic teams, it's important that all of the right stakeholders are part of these teams, so they need to be, it needs to be the highway agency, it needs to be the regulatory agency, the railroad company that's involved, or if it's a transit agency, if you've got a consulting firm that's involved, they need to, it's very important to make sure that you're pulling in all of the appropriate stakeholders into these diagnostic teams, and so they can work through the issues and work towards coming up with the best recommendations for the traffic control devices at these crossings. Down here at the bottom, I just kind of highlighted this real quick. It should come as no surprise, but it's the traffic control devices that we're talking about in this section are applicable pretty much to all roadways, public or private. The only exception is your privately owned roadways, pathways, and sidewalks that do not allow public travel. So if you are open to public travel, then the information here in Part 8, whether it's a public roadway or a private roadway, still applicable. Section 8A03, again, put this slide in here again just because it talks about the diagnostic team and the engineering study work that's associated with the evaluations of these grade crossings. And then this bottom paragraph here is pretty important. It's some pretty good information. It lists off a lot of the different types of things that you might be doing on a project that should trigger the evaluation by a diagnostic team. So I'm not going to read through all these, but this is definitely, this paragraph 5 and 8A03 is an important thing to be aware of if you're working on a rail crossing project. And then section 8A05, this looks at, again, engineering studies at grade crossings. And this top paragraph, it's just, again, talks about, the engineering study involved to be conducted by a diagnostic team. So it's kind of, hopefully you're getting the theme here that diagnostic team involvement is an important component to these rail grade crossing type projects. And then down below here, this just gives some of the guidance on the different factors to be that the diagnostic team should be taking a look at. Again, I'm not going to read through all of that, but just something that is important to be aware of if this is if you are working on this type of project. This section is in here, so this gets into adjacent grade crossings, and I just highlighted, there's a lot of information in here, and it lists out some of the different distances and some of the criteria. So, if you're 100 feet or less between grade crossings, you need to be treating that as one individual grade crossing. And then it kind of goes through some of the different scenarios and how those should be treated. So this is some good information here. It's, guidance information, but some very good info if you are, working on traffic controls for a rail grade crossing. And then finally here with section 8A12, this just talks about circular intersections or your roundabout type projects, and it has a standard requirement here, and I highlighted part of it. Paragraph 2 just talks about, so it gives a defined distance. If you've got a roundabout circular type intersection that was within 200 feet of a grade crossing, you are required to have a engineering study, again, with the diagnostic team looking at the impacts of that circular intersection and how it impacts, if there is potential queuing and how that might impact the grade crossing. So moving on into Chapter 8B. So we've got one slide I'm going to hit on here, Section 8B04. That section actually is in the Ohio Supplement, and then there's a couple others here that I'm going to look at, one of which is covered as far as a target compliance state. So I want to make sure we take a look at that as well, 8B16. So we're going to jump in here with 8B04. Again, so this section is in the Ohio Supplement. This section talks about the treatment of a passive grade crossing, so whether you're using a yield or a stop sign. What we ended up adding here with our Ohio Supplement, and it's kind of important to point out, is that our Ohio Revised Code has some specific information about the signage at rail grade crossings, so we wanted to make sure that users refer to that. And then also, if you are replacing existing signage, there is a database out there that has the existing information available, and if you're not changing the characteristics of that crossing, you need to be using that database and replacing that sign, with the same sign that was there. If you are making changes, then we're referring you to the Ohio Revised Code section, and also our TM has some additional guidance on determining the appropriate signage for that particular crossing. So this is a pretty important one. If you are making any changes to a rail grade crossing, you need to make sure that you're taking this into account, and that that a yield, the MUTCD default is a yield sign, but with a lot of with how Ohio law is structured, there's a lot of consideration given to stop signs. So that is why we wanted to refer users to this additional information, and working with our partners at the ORDC to come up with the appropriate signage. In this slide, just going to kind of buzz through this real quick. This link takes you to the database where you can search up all of the crossings, throughout the state, and you can take a look at the existing signage that's there. There's pictures associated with the crossings. It's a pretty nice tool if you are working on rail grade type projects. Excuse me. Moving on here, also wanted to touch on this. Again, this is still kind of tied to that Section 8B04. I just wanted to call your attention to the ORC section that gets into the signage at passive crossings. So, again, just kind of referring you to this. If you have this type of project, you're definitely going to be wanting to pull up all of these different resources. Moving on to Section 8B16. So this one is covered in the target compliance state requirements. So we're going to take a little closer look at this one. And again, the target compliance date for this is January 18th of 2029. So, so we're talking 3 years from now. And we're going to take a little closer look here. So what this section gets into, and particularly the 2 paragraphs that are mentioned there, is it's guidance information, but with this target compliance date, it definitely needs to be taken, needs to be looked at. So what we're talking about is these low clearance type crossings where you've got pretty steep grades coming to your crossing. There's information about the appropriate signage to be used, and then also some information about providing some detour information so that these types of vehicles have a alternate route that they can get around these types of crossings. And again, you know, this compliance date, January 18th of 2029. And this section I just pulled in real quick. This particular sign, you know, is intended to be at our rail grade crossings. And one of the things here, you know, with the new manual, the use of telephone numbers on signage has been greatly reduced, but this is an example of a sign that is still, you know, still allows the use of a telephone number. And then, you know, of course, you need to also have your crossing identifier, just, you know, because the purpose for this is so that if there is something malfunctioning, folks can get a hold of the agency so they can get out there and correct those issues. Looking at Chapter 8C with markings, so we've got one section that we do have in our Ohio Supplement, and then I also did want to hit on the last section of this that gets into dynamic envelope marking and your do not block markings. So with Section 8C03 with stop and yield lines, the primary reason this is in the Ohio Supplement is just that we have some ORC language that provides a range, you know, as far as the distance placement for your stop or yield lines. So the manual talks about the 15 feet, but the ORC also adds that kind of end of the range, so between 15 and 50. So that's the reason why this particular section's in our Ohio Supplement. And then moving on here to Section 8C06, just wanted to kind of illustrate your dynamic envelopes and your do not block pavement markings. You know, on the left-hand side here, this is your dynamic envelope markings, and the key thing to stress here is that you know, as a designer, or if you're prepping plans or doing maintenance, you know, to mark these up or whatnot, you need to be working with that particular rail company, because the different rail companies do have some differing criteria as far as the width of the dynamic envelopes. You want to make sure that is being incorporated, you know, when you're laying these out. And then on the right-hand side here, taking a look at this kind of a combination of some dynamic envelope markings, and then also some markings, some do not block markings, basically just trying to keep motorists from, you know, occupying these areas adjacent to the rail crossing, just, you know, obviously to keep our motorists safe, you know, because those interactions, you know, motorist and train interactions, those types of crashes are obviously very severe type crashes. Moving on here to Chapter 8D, looking at your flashing light signals, automatic gates, and traffic control signals associated with your rail grade crossings. We're going to take a look at several sections here, and in particular 8D09 through 8D12, they are all part of a target compliance date requirement. Nothing in this particular chapter is Ohio Supplement, but there is a few things I definitely want to hit on here. First off, in 8D04, I just wanted to point out this particular change. So previously, I mean, this language has changed a little bit. Previously, there was some guidance statements, and it was worded a little bit different. Now this has changed over. So if you're talking light rail crossings, there's some speed criteria with the actual light rail system as to when that triggers active traffic controls. And then if you get above a certain threshold, then that triggers the active traffic controls to be including actual gates for that particular crossing. So, we don't have a ton of light rail systems throughout the state, but if you're Cleveland area or one of the other parts of the state that do have a light rail system, this is just something to be aware of, that this has changed. Now moving into the sections that are part of the target compliance state, and just again looking at the target compliance table here, so that this gets into the preemption, movement, prohibition, Q cutter signals, pre-signals, that type of things. And the intent here is to be evaluating those types of crossings and making sure you're in compliance, or coming up with a plan to achieve compliance. And the types of things we're looking at, I just pulled this is an example, I believe, up in Marion County, where you've got a traffic signal in close proximity to actually 2 rail grade crossings. So, in those types of situations, if the signals are interconnected with the grade crossing traffic controls, there's some different information within these sections that you definitely want to be taking a look at, and that is the intent of this target compliance requirement. This slide, I just wanted to hit on what does an at or near grade crossing mean, and I just kind of gleaned through part 8 and kind of pulled in some different information, but in general, the most common distance that's being referenced is 200 feet. There are a few occurrences where they're talking about more than 200 feet, and even a mention of 400 feet. So unfortunately it's not a black and white definition, but this just kind of gives you the range of what at or near grade crossing means. This section here, 8D15, I wanted to pull this in here. On the left-hand side is a figure that's in the new manual, talking about the light rail transit signal indications, and then on the right-hand side here is the old manual. And the thing I want to point out here is with the old manual, it was permissible to have this triangular shaped signal head for your prepare to stop, and that has now gone away with the new manual. So again, we don't have a ton of light rail throughout the state, but the other thing that's important to mention here is that these types of signals, not only are they to be used on your light rail type systems, but there's also a reference back to part 4 that ties, the use of these signals. These signals are supposed to be also used for your bus rapid transit type movements. So I know there are a few of those types of projects that are being looked at. I think there's one actually already in service up in the Cleveland area. So this, if you do have signal projects for, updating those signals, or you have a project, bus rapid transit project in the works, you want to be paying attention to this and make sure, that this triangular shaped signal indication has gone away with the new manual. So just make sure to incorporate that. This is just a picture of that. Actually, this is up in the Cleveland area, an existing situation. This isn't a great photo because it doesn't show, it does have the 3 signal heads. The middle one here is the triangular shape. So, again, this is not a compliance type issue. So these can remain through their service life, but it's, if you are, if someone up in the Cleveland area is on this and works on these types, a project that may be going through to do some updates to the signalization for this corridor, you would want to be taking that into consideration to get rid of that, with an upcoming project, or when the service life has, if they're starting to malfunction, that type of thing. Moving on here, real quick, going to take a look at Chapter 8, and I didn't prepare any particular slide for this, but just wanted to show you the makeup of Chapter 8E. So this gets into your pathways, so your bicycle interaction, pedestrian interaction with rail grade crossings, and the appropriate type of traffic controls to be using for those applications. And again, some of this will tie in also to some of the information that we're working on, and we'll be presenting when we get into the session 5 of our series here, that gets into pedestrian and bicycle considerations as well. Just to kind of close out here, I wanted to provide this slide here again with just some quick hyperlinks to take you to all these primary resources that we kind of talked about several of them today. Didn't talk about maybe the Ohio SDMM, but this is where you'd go to find any information on Ohio specific signs that may not be in the standard highway signs document. So just want to provide quick hyperlinks to this information. And then with that, we're going to kind of wrap things up. And if there are any final questions or anything that's still kind of hanging out there, we can try to get your response now, or if we can't answer it, we'll do a little bit more research and get back with you after the session. So yeah, Kara, I'll hand it back over to you.
Great. Thank you, Kevin, so much for that. We do have just a couple of questions that have come through, not many. So if anyone has any questions that they would like to send over, please do them now. We have a question about, let's see here, they said, has the distance from intersection to a PHB changed?
Kara, and I paused because I am trying to get my screen to work as I'm shifting to the MUTCD. I do not believe it has changed for the distance of placement between the two.
Okay. Well then, while you're looking at that, let's see here. I am going to, right now I am putting in, everyone, I am putting in the links from that previous slide. So anyone that wants to go ahead and grab those out of the chat, oh, you are welcome to do so. Let me go ahead, and that one I just sent. Let's go ahead. There we go. I do believe a lot of these I put earlier in the chat, so if anyone hasn't had a chance to grab those out of there, go ahead and click in the chat area, and you will be able to check out the locations for the links. All right.
So, Kara, it does not look like it has in particularly changed with its placement.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much.
No problem.
All right.
Kara, I want to bring up one question that was submitted to us before from Lauren M. She asked about bike signal faces and with the language in 4H if you have to update existing bike signals to make sure they do not conflict with vehicular turn movements. This one's kind of unique. I know at the beginning of the webinar, Kevin showed the compliance table on what items need to be brought up to standard by a certain date. One thing we did not cover is interim approval items that were under previous interim approvals. So in section 1B07 of the MUTCD, that covers interim approvals. And for use of interim approval items, specifically for this webinar, which would be RRFB, and the bicycle signal faces, once those interim approvals ended, which was at the inception date of this version of the MUTCD, those are supposed to be brought up to compliance within 3 months of those interim approvals ending. So it's a unique case for interim approval items that is kind of treated differently than other specific conditions.
Oh, thank you, Jonathan, for adding to that. We appreciate it. Okay, just a couple more questions to get through, everyone. Let's see here. What coordination with the rail owner does ODOT typically do when signing or pavement marking upgrades are needed at a crossing? What about signage and markings that need installed on a railroad right-of-way?
It's grounded the Railroad Commission. I think if there's a kind of specific case, I think it really depends on what you're going to be doing on railroad right of way. I know the dynamic envelope marking.
Everyone, just so you know, they are conferring. So we will be with you with
I think
that answer.
yeah, Tim was trying to join in, and the audio was seeming like it was cutting out. Tim, you want to try again, maybe, and see if it.
Yeah, sure. Do it now. Okay. Yeah. So, this is Tim Brown with RDC. I think first, I guess part of that question on if railroad coordination is needed, we do have internal resources here at RDC. Bobby Watkins with our office kind of acts as our liaison between RDC and all the districts on items that need railroad coordination. I would say, in general, if you are going to be within railroad right of way and fouling the tracks potentially with your work, those are items that typically need railroad coordination. Example could be that dynamic envelope marking at a railroad crossing, where you're going to basically be occupying the crossing, potentially fouling it to install it. Those are the items that you would need to work with the railroad. And Bobby is a great liaison for kind of giving the guidance needed on if railroad coordination is needed for your particular project. Signage, things like crossbucks, stop yield signs right at the railroad crossing are typically maintained by the railroad. Any advance warning, the W10 sign, circular sign with the R and R on it, those are typically maintained by the local highway authority. So they're typically far away enough from the crossing where you wouldn't necessarily need direct railroad coordination or flagging to just replace those like for like. Any kind of project that is restriping that changes the number of lanes, those are the types of projects where that diagnostic team really needs to be organized and meet and discuss the appropriate traffic control at the crossing if any kind of traffic pattern is being changed temporarily or permanently.
Great, thank you. I'm glad we were able to hear you for that. Great answer. I have a follow-up question. It says, does Jonathan's answer about the interim approval items mean that all existing RRFB signage should be updated immediately.
Correct.
Well, that was a good short and sweet answer. Okay. Next question. Oh, we've got that one already.
Hey,
Do
Kara,
odd,
real quick, just to interject here, I scrolling through some of the questions, I noticed there was someone asking about the PDF of the slides not showing all of the info around like slides 26, 27, and the reason for that, there was one of the slides actually, one single slide had 3 or 4 tables, and we kind of scrolled through them through using like the PowerPoint animations. But what I can do, I'll just send you a updated slide deck or a PDF. I'll just separate those out into separate slides, so all of those different tables will be on the updated PDF, and hopefully that would address, I think it was Randall that asked that, and should be able to get that information out to you here shortly.
that sounds fantastic. Yeah, and just so everyone knows, once we'll get that, and then we will also, like I said, be uploading the recording from this up to our YouTube channel. We'll have a little bit of editing that we need to do before we can send it out to everyone. But once we have the PDF and the recording is ready to go on the YouTube channel, we will send out the links to both of those to all of our registered attendees for today's webinar. So everyone will get that. So thank you very much. And yes, well, the recordings, no, the recording will not include the links to the PDFs, but sorry, I'm responding to a question. Someone asked, will the recordings also include a link to the PDFs? The recording will not include the link, but the email that has the link to the recording will also have a link to the PDF. So both links will be in there. It will not be in the YouTube description. Let's see here. Next question. Do automated vehicles travel on gravel roads?
I assume automated vehicles travel on gravel roads. To what level, I do not know. I have not heard that there's any explicit restriction based on type of roadway.
Sounds great. Okay, and our last question of the day. It would be great to have the MUTCD broken down into sections so it was easier to search certain sections. If you can pass that along to the national level, that would be great.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate that feedback, and yeah, that's something that we've talked to them a few times about, and I think some other states have already also mentioned that, and we're hopeful that the national MUTCD documents will also kind of incorporate that increased level of searchability, so that you can get keywords out of figures and tables and things like that, because currently some of those you don't pick up. So yeah, we are pushing for that as well, and hopefully that will be an update coming soon.
Wonderful. Okay, well, that was the last of our questions. Do any of our panelists, presenters, have anything else that you would like to add before we do our closing?
Just real quick, just want to thank everybody again for jumping on today, and hopefully we got you a little information you can use, and just want to make everybody aware again that our next session is coming up here in a couple weeks. It's actually, I think, instead of a Thursday, it's on a Wednesday, so a little under 2 weeks from now. So, you know, if you are work in the temporary traffic control area. That's going to be the primary topic for that session. And again, just thanks everybody for jumping on today.
Wonderful. And thank you, Kevin, for that very thorough overview. And we appreciate Jonathan and Timothy and Paul for addressing the questions in the panel throughout the morning behind the scenes. So thank you very much. That's greatly appreciated as well. On behalf of the ODOT and the Ohio LTAP, I want to thank all of you for your time and for the vital work you do to keep our roadways safe. Before signing off, just a few final reminders. If you were present for the full duration of today's webinar, your certificate will be emailed to you within 5 business days. These hours count towards Road Scholar Training Recognition Program if that is something that you are working towards. As we conclude, a brief 4-question survey will pop up on your browser. We truly value your feedback, so please take a moment to let us know your thoughts. We look forward to seeing you in session 4 on April 29th, where we will cover temporary traffic control. Please ensure you have registered for the specific session to receive your join link. Thank you again for joining us. Have a fantastic rest of your day, and we look forward to seeing you at the next one.